Bow down, liberal white dudes. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Liberal White Dudes. It is episode 3. Episode 3 is titled The Friggin' News. So today we're going to chat a little bit about where people get their friggin' news and whether or not it's actually news. And just as sort of a starter, I saw a study which kind of blew me away here, and I'm going to show you guys. 18%, like basically 1 in 5 U.S. adults, say they get their political news primarily through social media.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So,
Yikes.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Basically this, like it could be us. This is where they're getting their news. Us. That's,
Oh, no.
yeah. And are we news?
Not technically, no.
Yeah, I would say we're not news. I would categorize us as a talk show that shares opinions on the news and certainly shares facts or, things reported as fact in the news. But we are not journalists. We don't claim to be, I don't think,
Okay.
I don't think.
What separates us from, let's say, Tucker Carlson then? Is he news?
He's backed by a company that is news, if that makes sense. Like he's got, business daddies that run his situation. I think they make news. And he's got a syndicated cable television show.
I think there's some area where we would be splitting. Well, yes. I think there's areas where we would be splitting hairs a bit, but I would still consider them journalists in that degree because at least they have the resources to research and, and have people on the scene. And, that's different than people just giving their opinions on what they've read or seen. So I think there is a difference there, but.
Okay. All right. Not to put too fine a point on it, but yeah, I don't see a lot of difference between us and say like an OAN. I mean, they have they call themselves news. So that's a difference, right? And just show a little bit of what their current, go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, I think, again, the only difference there is, again, money. I think that the outreach that they have is ridiculous. The fact that they can get in on press conferences. We're not in on press conferences, I think, is really the whole thing.
Yeah.
is we're not holding the microphone to the president's face.
Sure.
Nor would he like us to.
Yeah, they've jumped through some hoops to get some, sort of accreditation or credentials or whatever to be considered news. But they're not, right? I mean, they, John Oliver did, of course, a full takedown of these folks, and they've got on their website right here. They're like, "Hey guys, like you're stuck paying for liberal mainstream media news. Get us,
right?
Demand."
I mean,
go ahead.
I think there's a real danger in. I think there are a lot of shows like ours that consider themselves news, and I think that's a danger in that. I think it's good that we as a show are self-aware and wouldn't claim to be news, but I think there are a lot of shows similar to ours that would say they are. And a lot of people, if you brand yourself as news, I mean, I just read something today that Newsmax beat Fox News in ratings for the first time. Only for a small time slot, but that's a milestone. That's massive.
That's ridiculous.
Newsmax. So,
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, Breitbart calls themselves Breitbart News. If we called ourselves Liberal White Dude News, does that make us more news than we are now?
I think it's worse branding, but
yeah, I mean,
right, but that's what
at the very least.
I think that's what I mean. I don't think we are news, but I think a lot of shows like ours simply brand themselves as news, and a lot of audiences view it that way. I can tell you from personal experience, people in my life, people I've interacted with that are on the other side of the aisle that would give me their news sources. And I will tell you right now, they are not news, not a one of them. So, but they're branded as they are. They really look like news. They look like news to those people.
Yeah. Well, and if 18% of people adults are getting their news from social media, so it's secondhand at best, right? It's something that somebody shared or something said. One of the reasons that I was picking on OAN specifically, aside from being just, Trump's cheerleader just kind of running with whatever garbage headline he might want to hear, was this. Oh, wrong thing. Let's show this. So YouTube suspended. It's the title here is from BBC. So across the pond, YouTube suspends U.S. news channel for COVID cure. And of course, OAN, their major thing is YouTube, right? So, but it says U.S. news channel.
Oof.
So it's hard to know, like what constitutes news. All right, I'm gonna say we're not news.
Right.
Final standing. Final call.
Final call.
Yeah.
We're not news, but we're happy to talk about the news for today. Breaking news for today: Pennsylvania shot down the most recent threat to democracy. How do people feel about that?
Well, I think it was inevitable. I think we saw it coming. I think the only people that didn't see it coming are the very same people that are pretty unhappy with it. So, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. I feel in so many ways that so many Trump supporters seem to not be very aware of the situation.
Yeah. It's very odd to me that there's such a disconnect between that, like what is actually happening and what people think is happening. Like the fact that there's the divide is so wide on that is crazy to me.
So, I mean, I think part of that comes from not even just the news, which of course there's a bunch of circles out there that are pushing the narrative that, Trump might still be president, but also from the top down. He's not saying he's not president. And also, exactly. AJ, didn't you read something about GOP Congress people or something related to whether or not Trump won the...
I did, but... Right. No, I did. But first I want to mention that just because it kind of piggybacks on what I was mentioning, the reason that Newsmax obviously has leaped to the forefront is because of Donald Trump's touting them as a news source. And so he's literally telling his supporters, go get your news from Newsmax. That's why. But, and Newsmax, of course, is, an outlet that's not reporting that Joe Biden has won the election. So, of course, I mean, it just connects those very simple dots here. Donald doesn't want to admit that he's lost. He only wants to acknowledge news sources that also refuse to admit that he's lost. So that's where he's going to tell his supporters to go. But what you were mentioning was, there was an article in Washington Post on Friday. They had sent reporters to reach out to all congressional Republicans and to ask them 3 questions, which was, 1, who won the election? 2, do you support or oppose Donald Trump's continuing efforts to claim victory? And 3, if Joe Biden wins a majority in the Electoral College, will you accept him as the legitimately elected president of the United States? Now, they asked or reached out to all of the Republicans in Congress, and this is where they stand. On who won the election, out of all of them, 27 said Joe Biden, 2 said Donald Trump, remarkably, and 200 and the sadder number I think here is 220 gave no answer.
Yeah, I mean it's just too many.
Yeah, and the numbers are just as bad for the other questions. Do you support or oppose his continuing efforts to claim victory? Only 9 say they oppose this circus. 8 actually come out and say they wholeheartedly support this nonsense, and 232 Republicans, leaders I might add, remain silent. And then for the third question, if Joe Biden wins, will you accept him as the legitimately elected president? Only 32 said they would. 2 said they still would not. And staggeringly, 215 still said nothing.
I mean, I just don't know how...
the presidential election, no comment.
Yeah, that's such a... It's so misleading in so many ways. I think the reason they do that, to be honest, is because if they don't, the odds that they... I think the thing is that you lose with the majority of the population who voted because Biden won, if you say that Trump is winning, and you lose with the minority of the population who would vote you into office as a Republican,
right?
if you say that he didn't.
Well, I touched on that a little bit last episode. I was talking about how it seems that the, so many Republicans have just melded with Trump supporters, wholehearted Trumpers, that now, just regular congressional Republicans, Senate Republicans, their constituents are Trump supporters. So if they come out and do something as simple as acknowledging the fact that Joe Biden was elected, like you said, Jared, they could literally just lose votes. And they're avoiding it because they don't want to lose votes. It's like, I applaud the few Republican leaders that have come out and said that that's appalling, that you won't even acknowledge this. But that have been very.
I've said multiple times before that I think reality has a liberal bias, because I know for a fact that every time I have found something that was considered news turn out to be false, I'm upset. I'm upset that it was, propagated and not fact-checked and not, and it takes very little effort to fact-check anything the president says, anything,
right.
That you see in the mainstream media. Conservatives often say that's fake news, when there is legitimate fake news out there, right? But it's not.
Yeah.
It has a spin. It has a slant, and I get wanting your news to have, the slant that you want it to have. You want to have, Fox News throw a fit when some, like gay marriage gets passed. You want to go to your news source that says, aren't we all upset that gay marriage is a thing? And so that you can be informed that gay marriage is a thing, but then also be upset in your corner of the world or whatever, right? And for us, we want to go someplace where it's like, yay, gay marriage is a thing. And then we can just be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I've said this many times before. I feel like something that's been very disappointing, at least for me personally, with people I know that are Trump supporters, but is that, and I have no problem saying this, the reason he gets so much support, the reason he got so many votes, the reason he got more votes than any sitting president has ever received, is because he has validated and confirmed the prejudices of a very large population of this country. And that's the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. He gives them validation. He confirms it for them. That he's the one that goes out and says, if you're reporting these facts, you're fake news. Telling his supporters, treat these news outlets like fake news. Like they're not real. He lives in a fantasy world, and he just brings all of his supporters along with him. And it's highly disappointing, but at the same time, just so remarkably surprising, until you start to think that all he's doing is confirming the prejudices that have existed in a lot of these communities for a very long time. Yeah. And they just never felt like
if you tell a racist guy that he can be racist without any consequences, he will be.
Right.
And if you confirm for him that racism is okay over and over and over again, then you're going to see it. It's going to, and for those people, even for people that who have those mini racist thoughts, and they hear somebody who's being macro racist, and they're like, yeah, I'm not racist. I just am a little bit racist, and I should go. And I feel like this guy will support my mini racism. Yeah. And it's just this whole, I don't know, it's a whole thing.
I still think there's the stock issues, that people vote on, the abortion issue and the, gun control issue. There's still the stock Republican issues that he gets to ride the back of, regardless of whether or not he supports them or not. He can give them lip service. But then, he can pick up all the white supremacy votes. I don't think Republicans were missing those before, though.
I think they were missing them in a as much of an activated sense. I think that's really what it is. I think that previous Republicans only really no, seriously, that activating those people. I think there's a bit of a, because I think before, at least, there was a bit of a shame to that. Being a Nazi was a bad thing. Being a fascist was a bad thing. Not that it still isn't. I believe that it is, but I think that it's for a lot of people, I think there are a lot of people that are like, yeah, I'm, and there's different labels for it now or whatever. You call yourself a, classic, a classic liberal or a traditional conservative or whatever the terminology people use.
Patriot. That's the patriot. Latest one as far as I feel like is the fill-in for garbage person.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and here's the thing, like, I'm a patriot. I love my country. Had multiple conversations with multiple people about why I love America.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, we said before, just as a sidebar, how well before we started this show, just in conversation, we've mentioned how it's kind of a shame that patriotism, very vocal and outspoken love for America, has been somewhat tainted by
co-opted
yeah,
by
really
the worst
just
folks.
yeah.
By the
I agree.
absolute
Yeah.
worst folks.
Right. But I mean, it's like you said, we all consider ourselves patriots. But if I flew a flag out in front of my house on a big flagpole, chances are you'd be like, that's a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
alienating. If you're driving your truck through my community and you have a U.S. flag flying off the back of it, I make assumptions about who you are, and it's not somebody like me.
Right.
I mean, like
Yeah,
me
exactly.
in a lot of respects, except for their viewpoints, I suppose.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing to have happened in that regard. You know what I mean? I think some of it just stems from the fact that so many on the right view liberals or as, and obviously as anti-American, or just not as that's just the message that we're not patriots. It's just so strange to me, because that's precisely what we are. It's precisely what we're concerned about.
Yeah.
It's precisely what we're trying to preserve,
A better, more inclusive America based on the idea of America.
Right.
Yeah.
And that idea has changed a little bit in the sense that we have tweaked what was said, so that it doesn't just say land-owning white males anymore. To say, everybody.
Well, I like what you said there about it's about creating a country that really does reflect the values that this country are based on. But like you said, obviously we've grown, we've progressed. Progressives, that's part of the
It's part of the plan.
Part of the thing, part of the idea. And that's another thing. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I mean, the assault on knowledge and science and advancement and progression has just been, by far, to me, one of the most surprising aspects of Trump's administration is the just all-out assault on science and education.
I have been surprised how much easier that is when it comes from the top on down. The assault was there, during the Obama years. I mean, you definitely had lots of climate denial and things like that, but it wasn't as forefront. I felt like nobody was really buying that. You have flat earthers who are sitting around, chatting about how this isn't a thing, right? But I didn't feel like it was so accepted. Yeah, that's what it is. It's normalization of the idea that, well, scientists don't know.
Yep.
Trump said in a press conference, do you want this? This guy listens to science. Talking about Biden.
Yeah, and that was like a bad thing. It wasn't a selling point. It follows science.
Yeah, that was like
that's one of the things he did during
his character. And I was like, that is.
Yeah. Now, do you want this guy
should want that.
Who reads books?
Oof.
Who reads books and listens to people who know stuff about things? Listen. What you really want is someone like me who listens to no one except for myself and a couple of people on television.
Well, the funny thing about that is, how often he touts his Ivy League education at the same time.
Yeah.
Very, it's just so ridiculous.
He's so, what's the thing that he said towards the beginning of his, it's just like I don't remember exactly what the quote was, but it was something about his intelligence or whatever, where he was talking, like, he was just like boasting about his own. He's like, I'm so smart or whatever.
Or that he's a stable genius.
That's exactly what it was. That he's a stable genius. I'm like, if you just say it, if you just say that you're a stable genius.
Stable geniuses never say like that.
Yeah, man. That's not the bag.
Yeah. No. You don't have to run around. It's like the people on Facebook who are always like, oh, I love this guy so much. I'm like, that relationship is doomed. They
Right.
spend every day telling all of their Facebook friends how much they care about each other.
How much they love each other.
Yeah.
That's a
Simply put, if you're a genius, you don't have to tell people you're a genius.
Yeah.
manifesting.
People come to that conclusion on their own. I did like, by the way, that Biden came out recently and said a bunch of nice stuff about Fauci, you know? It was basically like, because here's the thing. Experts are experts. You know, when Trump would stand up there and disagree with the experts in the room, you know,
right?
There's a whole feeling that it's news if you feel like it's true. Like that's the truth. As long as you feel like it's the truth. It's not though.
It's not though.
Right.
That's not how it works.
News.
Right. Well, literally taking someone who has dedicated their entire education and professional career to studying this thing.
Exactly this.
You know, and like you said, it's certainly nothing new because they've been doing it. Climate change deniers have been doing it. Just the same scientists again devoted their entire education, their entire careers, to the study of this thing, so they could tell you probably better than anyone on the planet what's actually going on. Just again, choosing not to believe that. And I mean, so it's the same mentality, but shockingly so widespread.
Yeah, it's settled science. And not every scientist is on a Democratic payroll. Not every scientist is a liberal. There's plenty of racist scientists.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The basis of most sciences.
There's plenty of
sexism going on.
Religious scientists. There's plenty of, people who would vote Republican who also happen to be scientists. And it's settled science as far as any number of these things, right?
These aren't like hypotheses. This isn't like it's not like theories. This is proven science, and it's remarkable.
Study after study after study is showing that two people wearing masks talking to each other from 6 feet away is much, 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 much less likely to transmit COVID than two people standing unmasked 6 feet away. Or especially
I feel like I really wish I could just go back in time to 18 months ago and interview every Trump supporter and ask them, if you have flu-like symptoms, do you think doing this or doing this is safer? Because it's like that the element in there that I think is throwing the wrench into that is that it's COVID. Because again, we have a president who had first denied it.
And the Democratic hoax.
Yeah. So, and then it just, went downhill from there. And so I think it's because it's COVID and because of the narrative that's coming out of the Republican Party and out of our president's mouths. That's how it's kind of devolved in that way. But still shocking, I think. It's still surprising. Even with the stupidity you could acknowledge, it's still surprising.
There's something I read where it was like a thing that was like, if masks work, then why do we need the 6 feet of distance also? And if the 6 feet of distance works, why do we need the masks? And I was like, that's not additional steps is what you do to make sure that something is safe. When you're like cutting into wood, you wear a mask and you wear goggles. That's to keep particles out of your nose and particles out of your eyes. It's not like if the glasses work, then like that's not how it works.
Jared, if the seat belt works, then why do I need the airbag, bro?
True. I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point.
Solid retort.
Yeah.
Come back from that.
Yeah.
Come back.
Yeah, because in a perfect world, we'd all be hermetically sealed for 3 weeks. And then it would die on its own, and then we would be back to, being
whatever we're doing.
All we can be, right? Being all we can be. You got a minute, you tell me I can't spit in somebody's face just because I might kill them. Government tells me what to do. There's so many things the government tells you what to do, right? That nobody is up in arms about. I think seatbelts was a great example. That's a safety thing. It is law. You can get a ticket for it. Like, it's just a thing that we do because less people die in car accidents when everybody's wearing a seatbelt.
Well, and it's the simple, like you said, it's a very simple, it equates perfectly because it's like, and then everyone can agree that the data is solid on seatbelts. Everyone agrees, right? Bipartisan. Everyone agrees the data on seatbelts is solid. It saves lives. Everyone agrees it should be a law. No one disagrees with the seatbelt law. And fundamentally, it's the same as the mask.
Yeah, I wonder
You know?
if there was a scare story actually. Fox News, the top. And again, man, I feel like I keep pushing people to go look at these sites, but Fox News, their top story was like, Biden is talking about dropping a mask mandate. Bum bum bum. And it's just like, that's a good.
What about my personal freedom to die?
Yeah, that shouldn't be angering. That should be like, good. Finally, maybe we'll get to a point where we can actually round the corner, as opposed to continuing to perpetuate this because everybody's tired of it. I didn't want to devolve into COVID because I'm pretty sure Jared said that YouTube gets all over your business if you talk about that. On YouTube.
Oh, okay.
But, I mean, but it'll be fine.
We're news. So,
we're news now.
We're not news. We're not in.
You made me wonder if OAN and Newsmax and Breitbart and Fox all went after seatbelts. Like right now, if that was their drive, seatbelts are killing people. Would
somebody in the chat says people fought the seatbelt rule back in the day too. Unfortunately, he said people would drive more recklessly if they were mandatory.
Yeah.
People would drive more recklessly if they were mandatory.
Woo!
Well, it's a good thing my death machine has strapped me into it. Like, what is? People are so nuts. I just can't. Like, how do you even?
All right. Well, that is today's episode on the Friggin' News. We appreciate everybody's participation. Glad you all came here and saw us do this. Remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on Facebook and like us on Twitter.
Follow us on Twitter.
Subscribe to us on YouTube.
Subscribe to us on YouTube and find us all over the internets. Once again, thank you again. Liberal white dudes.